Welcome to Tribal Echoes, the fifth National Arts, Culture and Literature commemoration in honor of folk hero Sri Birsa Munda's sacrifices. At Tribal Echoes, we, the Association for Parivartan of Nation, organize roundtable discussions, webinars, cultural activities, and various arts and debate competitions. Following this tradition today, we present our podcast on empowering marginalized communities through social technology, needs, challenges, and opportunities. Today, we are joined by Gurumurthy Kasinathan, founder and director of IT for Change. Gurumurthy brings over 34 years of global experience in the development sector, with a notable focus on the role of digital technology within education. He also co founded the National Coalition on Education Emergency and has been instrumental in shaping educational policies and practices across India and abroad. His work includes significant projects in around 30 countries, specializing in teacher professional development, educational leadership, and digital integration in education systems. A multilingual communicator and former visiting faculty at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, today Gurumurthy will discuss how integrating ICT, information and communication technology, can advance marginalized communities and the challenges of implementing it at the grassroots level. So let's get started.
Hello, I'm Gurumurthy from IT for Change. IT for Change is a NGO that was set up in the year 2000 with the vision that information communication technologies should be used in a manner that makes it beneficial for the most marginalized sections of society. In 2000, we saw that technology was being used by businesses very well by them. But we realized that simply taking the same technology and thinking it will be useful for the marginalized groups, for the common people, it was wrong thinking, and this meant that the design of technology itself has to be imagined in a manner that it will be useful for the people. And that's the basis for setting up IT for Change. In the past 23 years of our existence, we have had a lot of useful experiences. We have learned a lot, and I want to share a bit of that in this talk. So, our initial belief that technology simply cannot be transplanted from the business sector to the social sector, we have seen it to be true in multiple instances. And the first thing we would like to say is that the contexts are different, the requirements are different, and because the context and the requirements are different, the way technology has to be imagined is to be different. But before we go into the difference, let us start with what is this thing called technology? Why are we all talking about it? What is the power of it? If you understand what is the power of it, then it will help us imagine in what ways it can be social. So when we say information and communication technology, it is not something new, because human beings have wanted to use technology for communicating from thousands of years. So for example, the first ICT or first information technology is language. So language is also ICT only. And you use language is technology because it is artificially created by human beings. It is not a natural thing found in nature. But the good thing about language as a technology, all of us are equally able to produce language, because the basic requirements for language are present inside the human being, with exceptions of course, but all of us can speak, all of us can understand, all of us learn language in childhood. So technology, particularly communication technology, is something that all of us use all the time for living in a community, for communicating with others, for sharing information, for even storing information. So language is not only for communicating, but we also use language to store the information inside our own head through language. Over time, more and more ICTs or more and more information communication technologies have come into the world. More and more complex technologies have come into the world. So language is the oldest. After language, we had script as a technology. We had print technology. We have mass media as a ICT, radio, TV. So digital technology, which is the latest to enter into the ICT space, is one of the several technologies, and all these older technologies we continue to use. We continue to use TV, radio, script, print, everything is used still for. But this modern technology, which is digital technology, is a complex technology. It is not created by each human being cannot create it. You need devices for accessing the information. You need devices for communicating the information. So But the principle of the whole thing remains the same. Can we communicate better? Can we communicate easier? Can we communicate faster? And if you are able to do all that, naturally it benefits us. So that is a starting point. Now, whether it's a business or a community or a public sector institution, the purpose of ICT is the same: store information, share information, process information, or communicate with one another. That's why we call it ICT. The problem with why we need social technologies is that, unfortunately, unlike the earlier technologies where there was a lot of public investment to make sure that the technology is available to everybody. So when we created TV, the broadcast is available to everybody, whether rich person or poor person. But now in the neoliberal environment since 1990s, we know that in India and all over the world, the market is supposed to be provide the delivery for everything. Therefore, modern digital technology, unfortunately, we think it can only be provided by the business sector. The state has withdrawn from its responsibility of providing digital technology for everybody. Because business is primarily producing technology, naturally they will look at the market and naturally they'll make products which are only relevant for rich people who can pay for it. That is a problem we face today. So, the technology that is required for the marginalized groups is not produced by the market because there is not much money. Of course, slowly technologies will spread even through the market mechanism. So there are some 2-3 very clear problems. In fact, just now I was at Jharkhand State Open University and they are running open courses for students across the state. It's a very, very noble idea. But all the courses are available in English language. But the students who are going to come from all over the state, English is not their language. Even Hindi may not be their language because Jharkhand is a place where there are so many tribal languages. I am told there are 10, 11 tribal languages. Now, digital technology allows you to create the course material in the other language also easily. It is not difficult. But the problem is that unless there is an investment, you have to create the material in Nagpuri, you have to create it in Maithili. Unless you do that, the material won't be available. So, language is a very significant barrier for the people to use technology because the elites of the country and the elites of the world, for them English is a language of comfort. And maybe 70% of the content in India is in English language, which straight away means it's not available to people So social technology, language is an important thing. Another important factor is the device itself. The important thing to understand about digital technology is the non-device part of it. No problem. Yeah. So I said one thing is language is an extremely important factor to make technology social, and that requires investment. No business is going to create course material in Nagpuri or any of the tribal languages which is spoken by the Santhali or the Ho tribes. There is no money in it. Public investment is required to be done. The other problem with but the important thing about this technology is that once I make the material in Nagpuri, making copies of that material doesn't have any cost. That we forget. So public investment is actually very much worth it because you invest once, you create the resource, it's available infinitely for people. And that is advantageous. Why should you give that benefit to the private sector who will make it once and keep on making profit by keeping on selling to everybody? So public investment is necessary, it is beneficial because digital technology is what we call the marginal cost of production is nil. Marginal cost of production is nil means making additional copies of that material doesn't have any additional cost at all. The second problem, apart from what we call as these are called soft items. It may be software, it may be content which can be replicated without cost. But what is costly is the hard infrastructure, which is for the people, it's the devices. Now, there is no reason why inexpensive devices cannot be manufactured in a manner that everybody can access it. Now, of course, we know that smartphones, as they call it, they're also available for 5,000, 6,000 and therefore it's available to everybody. But still it is expensive. We may think 6,000 is not a big amount. But for people who are struggling, for them even 6,000 is a big amount. And like you were mentioning, when the COVID was on and there was online education, there is one phone in the family, the parents will give it to the son. they will not give to the daughter. They may give to the older child. They don't know what to do. They are rationing it out. So it is the responsibility to establish shared hardware infrastructure for the community. It is not necessary that everybody should have a device to themselves. But can we establish community infrastructure for technology? The government has a program which is called village knowledge centers. Okay, but the problem is this whole village knowledge center government of India is pushing in a business model. Again, if you do business model, they will only do the things which will make money for them. Now, a ration shop is not a, from the point of view of society, a ration shop is not a business. It is something to provide food to the people. A school is not a business. A primary health center is not a business. A public library is not a business. In the same way, the knowledge centers, if they are established with public funding, then the community can fully participate in the benefits of technology. For social, therefore, essentially, I am saying for social technology, two things are required. On the hardware side, there has to be investment to create the basic infrastructure for community access. That is the first thing. Second thing, other than the hardware, what we call as the soft items, there, once it is created, it is available permanently for people, and again, their public investment has a big role to play. Our underlying economic model of neoliberalization is the reason why digital technologies have not really been able to provide the benefit to the people at large. It's an economic model problem.
So, what are the particular challenges that you witness in a tribal state like Jharkhand when it comes to accessing technology? Because it's not just a matter of how technology can help marginalized communities, but it's also a matter of accessing that technology. And so, how do you see it different from, in general, the problem of accessing technology and the problem of accessing technology for a state like Jharkhand?
Yeah, in a sense, what I said earlier, large part of it will apply again. So, I was talking to people here, and one of the things we see about Jharkhand, but we see it about other states also, is that the government is stopping to invest where it is required. So, the government is not investing in education, the government is not investing in health, and the government is therefore not investing in technology because it seems like it is something very remote. It's not required for everybody. But if you take the example of online education, instead of, of course, schools should be set up everywhere, but if you want to provide education to people who are unable to access the schools, then online education is a useful possibility for them. But for that, access is very much required. So I would say that one is making infrastructure, we should call it community technology infrastructure or social technology infrastructure. It is very much possible to do it. It is like the libraries that were there maybe 10, 15, 20 years back, when in India we had a total literacy campaign. And we realized that total literacy campaign cannot succeed unless there are public libraries in every place. The beauty of a public library is you don't need to have it in your home. It is one place in the village, there is a set of 100 books or 500 books, everybody can read it and people can keep reading it again and again. So setting up the library as a one-time cost has a huge benefit in terms of helping the children, people, both adults and children, to be literate and to use literacy for their own empowerment. In the same way, we need to think that the modern community technology infrastructure is like a library. In fact, the community technology infrastructure can be sitting inside the library itself because the purpose is the same. A library's purpose is provide knowledge, information to everybody. And digital technology also plays the same role. So, if there are 260 blocks in Jharkhand, there is no reason why at the block panchayat level, every block panchayat should have in the panchayat bhavan itself, we should have a very good technology infrastructure available. Ideally, it can't be only taluk level because the taluka itself will be very big. Ideally, it should go to gram panchayat also. But immediately the government says that every taluk panchayat, every district panchayat, I'm going to have a very good community technology infrastructure which is available for people. They can come. It's like what we call cyber cafe. Yes. But cyber cafe is a business model. Whereas for poor people, then there should be facilitator in that place also. So IT for Change in Mysore, we are running these, what we call as Namma Mahiti Kendra. Namma Mahiti Kendra, I'm sure it's Namma is mine. So Namma Mahiti Kendra means my information center. So it is run by the women of the village. We support it, but the women of the village have a committee. Then one woman in the village, a young woman, actually runs the center. It is an information center for anybody can come. And services are available free. But this woman actually enables the people who come because for them technology is very new. Devices are difficult to handle. Everything is not available in the local language. So the what we call Sakhi. The person who manages the center is called a Sakhi. Sakhi means friend, not a commercial franchisee operator. So if the government of Jharkhand sets up taluka centers, employs a woman from the local community, from the tribal community, from the marginalized groups, that will encourage the marginalized groups to say that, okay, this is a place for us. Why don't we go? Why don't we learn about technology? In the same center, classes can be run for basic literacy. So, for example, what we find is in the online time also, children are told to access online classes. Somebody who is in the urban place, who has got a lot of facilities at home, who has seen devices for a long time, very quickly they'll learn how to use a device. Somebody in the rural area will not know how this thing works. And the parents are not going, normally parents will guide the children. When it comes to digital technology, parents are worse off because they are not even able to handle the device. So, the first step to making digital technology useful for people at large is that you have to set up community infrastructure at every village level, but you start as a district level, start as a taluk level. Have a facilitator there whose job, like the librarian, is to make sure that everybody in the geography is able to use the center to the best of their ability, whatever they need for that training, capacity building. Also, the Sakhi will find out what is it that people really need. There is a crop failure. We need to know about crop insurance schemes. There is a disease amongst the cattle. How do you find out information from online? What government schemes are available for addressing that? So all that Sakhi is supposed to do. So in our centers in Mysore, the Sakhi does those jobs. The Sakhi is the intermediary between the technology and the government on one hand and the people on the other. So people are able to get the benefit of the technology and the government schemes that are there for them, because otherwise nobody knows about the schemes. So this is something the government should immediately implement. It's not very expensive, but it enables the benefits of development to be able to reach the poor. It should not be a commercial franchisee model. It should be a community model, for which, like a public library, the funding has to come from the government itself.
What is the role that the local village leaders play in bringing about this social change, that acceptance to technology? So, what is the role that you see that local leaders play?
So when you say local leaders, it's always a dicey situation, because many times these local leaders are actually the people who have the current power hierarchies in their favor. So that is always a problem. So for example, when at Ready for Change we set up centers in Mysore villages, we were very clear that the management committee has to come from women in that village from the Dalit community. So they are not the village leaders, far from it. They are far away from the village leaders, because village leader typically is a male, is an old male, and male from the dominant community, a dominant caste or whatever is the dominant caste in the village. So village leaders are usually a problem because they represent the traditional hierarchies of power. But of course, when it comes to technology, good thing about digital technology is even the existing village leaders know it is a good thing. So they won't oppose very much if we say, let's have a young woman as the Sakhi who is coming from the Dalit community. They may not necessarily object very strongly, but some resistance will be there. For example, where do you locate this center? Always a village leader will say, locate it in the place where they are already there. We say, no, we'll always locate it in the Dalit Basti only. We won't locate it in the bus stand, because bus stand is not a place that women will be comfortable to go. So location of the center, who is managing the center, who is the facilitator in the center, all these are important, powerful ways in which you can upset the existing power hierarchies in a very subtle way. You can't make enemies, but then it really makes sure that the technology is available to the marginalized sections. So our program, we started with Mahila Samakhya, which is a program of the Government of India. And Mahila Samakhya's whole idea is to work with, the Bahujan women. So they are marginalized on account of gender, on account of class, and of course they are poor. So, that is the basic idea.
That's beautiful. I think that also challenges these caste hierarchies as to how Dalit women can't operate a mobile phone.
Yes,
And that's can't have when Ujjwala Yojana came, then the important thing that was that to have a chulha in your house. And while there can be criticism of the government as to it's not doing enough, but to have a chulha in your house was a step ahead for women who didn't have chulhas for the longest in their house on behest of their caste community. So and here I see it's a very beautiful thing as to how you. So my question would be, while these are the benefits, what are the major drawbacks that you saw in terms of challenges, in terms of limitations while your work in Karnataka?
So one thing is that nobody has a problem with digital technology. They see that it is useful, but the problem is in the very some broader things that are happening in society. So as I said, neoliberal thinking is very dominant in not only within the government but even in society. So for example, when we started work in 2006, at that time Mahila Samakya was very strong, and Mahila Samakya had a very clear philosophy that our idea of bringing women together is for social empowerment. So they had self-help groups. The self-help groups did do some savings and that kind of a thing, but they were very clear that the savings and the loan is not the primary purpose of the Mahila Samakya. The primary purpose is domestic violence. Primary purpose is women getting employment, livelihoods, being able to go to the bank, go to institutions, go to spaces they are not able to go to, legally be aware about your rights. So that was clearly the primary focus, that social empowerment is the primary driver, economic empowerment is a byproduct of it. So that was a very important thinking. But now if you go and see Karnataka and maybe many places of India, the self-help groups of women are 99%, they only talk about savings and loans. So the whole model of collectivizing women to focus on their empowerment has sort of given way to the thing that I want to get money to go ahead because I want to buy something or I want to take a loan for something. But this is a broader phenomena. As I said, it is not digital technology. Of course, has a role to play, because whatever is happening in society, digital technology makes that whole phenomena faster, quicker. Like today, for example, if there are riots in Manipur, the same digital technology will be used to make it worse. Same digital technology can be used to solve the problem also, but that is more difficult. So one thing, the broader thing we see as a challenge in our work in the villages in Mysore is that it is becoming more and more difficult to talk to women and men about issues of political ideas of equality, political ideas of dignity, of empowerment, of fraternity, because the economization or the marketization of our thinking has become that much more stronger. Of course, what we do is the antidote to that, but that is one big challenge that we find in the villages. But many good things are also happening. More colleges are available, roads are better now, buses are available. So obviously, over time, the number of girls going to college, the number of girls thinking that they don't need to get married very soon, all that is getting better. But I think still we are a very, 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 very long way from where we should be.
Slightly off topic, not off topic exactly, but I'm framing my question. So what I'm trying to understand here is that while technology has been helpful, and we talk about how technology can lead to knowledge advancement, but knowledge forms can be very hyper local. Like in Jharkhand, when you come to understand, then knowledge forms can be how to play mandir, or knowledge forms can be the local skills. So can technology really advance to cover all the hyper local knowledge forms?
Very much, I think. So one of the things that one generally, the understanding of knowledge also is that we see knowledge is also power, and therefore, wherever there is power, there is hierarchy. And hierarchy is a method of advancing power. So knowledge hierarchies also advance power in particular ways, and the way the digital technologies has allowed global knowledge to overpower the local knowledge. We use the term, right, McDonaldization or Disneyization of the world. So like when I'm going through Jharkhand, the main places, it looks like Bangalore because the same Reliance digital store is there. So therefore, across the whole culture itself is getting modified in a particular way, and digital technology is playing a role there, because people who have got money, people who have got power, they want to push certain ideas, not because they are evil, but because it makes money for them. So naturally, they will push in particular ways. But the technology can be used exactly in the opposite way also. So we are not saying the global should not be there. We are not saying that, for example, democracy or liberty are ideas that came from the West. So we are not saying we don't want those ideas, right? So the idea is, how can the local and the global coexist? So and again, as I say, that is really up to us. We as a society, we as a government which represents us, we have to figure out ways by which the local knowledge, the local crafts, the local traditions, they have to coexist with the global. It's not one versus the other, but because the global is so much dominating the local, we feel that, oh, how can we do something about the local? One of the big things, of course, for Jharkhand and for India is language. They are saying if we don't do anything, languages will become extinct. Many of I am told some of the tribal languages of Jharkhand are also in danger of extinction. Now, when a language dies, something dies with that. So, the hyperlocal is a possibility, but again, the reason why it doesn't happen is public investment is required to promote ideas that are not commercially viable. Since public investment is missing, only those ideas that make commercial sense are pushed all the time. And we have yesterday I was talking to somebody and he said, we seem to accept it that this has to be the reality. I think we have to challenge in imagination that no, as I say, another world is possible. We don't need to necessarily only be victims of the market. Market is important, but that need not determine and drive every design of our life.
Yeah. Thank you. My next question would be that how can partnerships between government agencies, non-profit organizations and technology companies can help address these challenges of connectivity and access to tech devices?
So I would think that technology companies should actually play a very little role in it. Somehow, unfortunately, what has happened in the technology spaces, and this is a terrible, it's always, I think it's not anything new that whenever new technology comes in, the whole society starts treating the technology producers as gods. But for a bit of time, it will be like that. For example, I'm told when print technology was introduced, the people who were the printers, they were the most important people of society. In today's world, you would not think so. You will say, he runs a printing business, so what? Nothing big. But in those days, they were treated like gods because they had access to a technology which was miraculous, which made, you can print 1,000 copies of book and it can go everywhere. So today, unfortunately, we are living in a world where the Googles and the Microsofts and the Amazons, we treat as if they have the solution to all the problems of the world. Bill Gates is going around imagining that he has a solution for COVID. And that's a serious problem because people who have knowledge, people who have got wisdom, they are being bypassed by the people of the technology. Both the people of the technology and the government, they keep on bringing them to center stage. And I think we need to really say that, yes, technology is complex, it's new, we are trying to figure it out, and we need technology. But the design of technology, the decisions of what technology should do, cannot be made by the technology people. So government and civil society only, we should remove technology companies from this idea that they are a part of the collaboration. We don't need them as a collaboration. We will decide what we want and we will tell them what we want. And they will have to produce what we want. Whereas what is happening today is because the technology companies are also the biggest profit-making companies, they are designing technology and Facebook gives us something. Facebook's own research says that Instagram is the biggest cause for teenage suicide. Nobody is doing anything about it. So who allowed Facebook to decide that they will inflict Instagram on society in a completely uncontrolled manner? So civil society and government and relevant experts. So if you're talking about COVID, public health experts have to come in, not technology experts. Even if you're using technology for managing COVID, the design has to come from public health experts. So we have to change our thinking. Just like there was printing technology, and now we use printing technology whenever we wanted, however we wanted. Electricity is a very powerful technology. We use it however we wanted, whenever we wanted. Electricity companies are not determining for us. So in the same way, what can technology do? How can it help people? How can it help the most marginalized groups? How can we use technology for peace? We are using technology today. Social media is the biggest contributor to hate in society. It's the biggest contributor to intolerance. It's the biggest contributor to fascism. Now, the same technology can be used as an educational tool, but a lot of effort is required. It's not easy. I can always send a video which shows something which is fake and make people hate people. But if I want to make people have affection and respect for people, that also a video could do. But I cannot make a preachy kind of a video, right? So how can government and civil society come together, consciously put our constitutional ideals as the driver for technology? How liberty can be ensured? How fraternity can be ensured? How justice can be ensured? What should be the design of technology to allow these things? If we think like that, we will certainly find answers. Context to context, it will be different, but 100% we can do. I would like to give the example of Kerala as a state, which during COVID, for example, they made sure that every child has access to technology. And they focused a lot on migrant children. Any other state would have said, why should we bother about migrant children? They're not even a part of our state. They took special care for children coming from families from the northeast, from Jharkhand, from West Bengal. And they said those children must get technology because without them getting technology, our online classes will not be useful. So that extra care, and now recently I'm told they're setting up a fiber network which will reach every person in the state. The thinking is different. The thinking is technology should serve the people. If you are able to think like that, certainly the solutions and answers will come. We have to stop thinking that technology can only be produced by the companies. Now we are in a state where we can live without that kind of a thinking.
My next question would be that we're talking about technological inclusion, right? So how can we one way matlab, how can we make it more democratic and more socially just? One, you listed a few points, but can you list few more for me? Matlab, that would be.
I think, see, I actually I will say there's only one point really, which is the ownership of technology. For something to be democratic, how is something democratic? When people own it. How is it not democratic? When some people own it and they use it to dominate over others. So our current design of technology, like I'm saying, is private sector driven. But if you're able to say that, let's say in Kerala, so in all over the country, when the government wanted to put computers in schools, many states went to Microsoft, went to NIT, went to Google and said, please help us. In Kerala, they don't allow any company to come. The government says, we know what to do. And in the whole country, Kerala is a very unique case where technology has really helped school education. You won't find that happen. In Jharkhand, for example, you may not even find computers that are working and used on a regular basis, even in high schools. You go to Kerala, even higher primary schools have computers which are used, teachers use it. So Kerala decided upfront that we don't need companies to tell us what we should do. So democratization of technology has to proceed with our saying that we will own it. Of course, in the case of technology, we must be aware of the fact that the government also can be dangerous. So many people will say that traditionally we always expected the government to do things for us. But when it comes to technology, the government can also use technology to control people, surveillance over people, collection of data which is not required to be collected. So today we find in India and every country in the world, governments are busy collecting data on citizens. But that is dangerous because it can be used against you. So we have to move with the idea that there is public investment, but there is some element of community control. So the community can come through local government, it can come through community-based organizations. It is complex only as an idea because it's easy for Google to own technology. If you say people, who are people? How do you define people? But I think Kerala has shown a wonderful way by which a public sector imagination of technology is extremely powerful to advancing the interest of democracy. I would say we need to move from the public sector to the community. But public is still important because in terms of funding, the investment has to come from the government, right? Communities will not be able to fund it because marginalized groups are anyway not having the resources. So public has a role, but finally the ownership has to be with the community.
Finally, I'll just wrap with two more questions. One is what are the policy recommendations that you would suggest, and second is your hopes for the future. Yeah.
So policy, again, it's I'll be sort of sounding like I'm repeating myself, but I think one important thing is in the policy design process itself. Like I said, traditionally, many times we find that the policy making is entrusted to the private sector or they have a very big role to play in it. And that's hugely problematic. So, for example, when the first national policy for ICT in school education was supposed to be created, the government created a committee with Microsoft and Intel and NIT in it. So we protested and said they have vested interest. They will only put in the policy which benefits them. So the government cancelled that process and then got NCRT to write it with the inputs from many people. So policy making, even today if you see government committees, the technology companies will have a pride of place, and that's a problem because they have a vested interest. Industry bodies could give inputs, but individual companies should not have a role to play. It's like you are doing a medical policy and you call Pfizer to say come and do the policy for us. That's very foolish. So governments have to stop doing that. So policy making itself has to come into the area of public interest individuals, public interest organizations have to play a role in that. And complexities, policy making is always complex. So technology companies will always try to tell us that technology is so complex that only they know what is to be done. But policy making itself is complex and we know that. So every policy will have exceptions and complexities. But if public interest is allowed to drive that, some solutions will come. Always solutions will be incomplete. So we have to keep on extending it until, the policy makes sense in most situations. So that is an important parameter, and we must accept that in the digital society, the distinction between virtual and real. There was a time when the virtual was very different and the real was very different. But now they are getting merged in some way. So everywhere, if you talk about health, you will talk about e-health, you'll talk about health databases, you'll talk about health systems, you'll talk about AI in health. So every single sector, agriculture, you're talking about databases, you're talking about soil health, you're talking about weather conditions, everything is digital. Without that, you can't do farming very meaningfully. So if the digital is entering every space in our society, then in every space we need to have public interest drive the process of what policy you are making, for who are you making this policy, what is it going to do to the interests of different people. So one important factor in technology policy is, very often we try to say as if you bring this policy it will help everybody, but never that can be possible, because every policy benefits somebody and doesn't benefit somebody. So that we have to make it explicit, who is it benefiting, who is it harming. Otherwise it will always benefit the powers that be. So making the underlying assumptions and thinking of these policies more clear, and that if these principles are clear, then the policy as output or outcome will always be the right thing. So public welfare, public interest driving it, representation of the right people in the policy making process, making explicit the benefits and harms from every policy. These are three important principles that we should follow for making policy making successful. I don't think I should really answer about my ideas in the future. It may be, I don't know what, it may depend on the fact that I'm 55 years old, and as you get older, you get more gloomy about life. And maybe if you're young, you are not so pessimistic. So I don't want to inflict my pessimism. So there are two. I think the only thing I would like to say is, see, all technologies have created problems. So I'm sure when print technology came, it created its own power hierarchies. And over a period of time, the society managed to respond to it, or I don't know what happened, but we don't talk about problems of print technologies. So digital technologies problems also can get ironed out over a period of time. But I think really we are in a problem now because nature accommodated our stupidities. But I think the time for nature to accommodate our stupidity is running out, which is the whole issue of climate change. And I think that digital technologies have played a very big role in fueling consumerism. So the extent of shopping that people can do for things they don't need at all, the way production is completely irrespective of actual demand, the way luxury goods are produced much more than meeting the needs of the people. So we are stripping nature of basically what nature has, and land is polluted, air is polluted, water is polluted, everything. So I think that we are running out of time before we can make sure that the human being nature relationship is not so corroded that we will not survive. So the imagination in my mind, which is a very bad imagination, is of the rats following the Pied Piper as they went to get drowned. So that Pied Piper may be technology, that Pied Piper may be consumerism, it may be neoliberal capitalism. But as rats, we are all rushing into the water without thinking where we are going, what we are doing. So we have to become extraordinarily critical thinkers and wise people, see where we are going, and take the right political decision that will arrest this moment. Is it possible? Of course, it's possible. Is it probable? I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and it was wonderful talking to you.
There is a gloomy end, but that's okay. That's how I feel. Thank you.
Team Apna extends a heartfelt thank you to Gurumurthy Kasinathan for his invaluable insights today. We trust you found our discussion as enriching as we did. To delve deeper into how you can empower and transform marginalized communities, please visit our website and connect with us on social media. Until next time, keep striving for change and making a difference.